Oh, okay. Here's one, but then I don't know the answer to. This is a very engineering question. A musical EQ, referring to a particular EQ as musical versus one that is not. What does that mean? Does that mean anything? What does that mean? Does it mean they?
Sure.
Does
it means something.
I love that EQ. It's such a musical EQ.
Yeah. When you use a tube EQ, for example, like a Pultec, TubeTech, my VLC from the Hazelbury Brothers, my Fern VT5, these additive EQs, the shape
so it's additive,
of these passive EQs, I would think of it additively for this case. The shape of the cue changes the amount that it's being boosted, right? There's a relationship to the width of the band to its amount. And it can adapt more musically to the frequencies that it's receiving.
What does that mean, more musically?
I know that's
it's just a term that people use, and I to be honest, other than
we're talking harmonically. We're talking harmonically. If it has even order harmonics in the tube type that's in the piece of gear, it's going to bring up better, more musical fundamentals that are in the key of the record that's hitting the gear, right? So if you're hitting a tube EQ or a musical EQ, you're getting out of it more of what you put into it versus getting out more of what you don't want from it. So I think it's subjective, but there is science mixed in here as well with harmonic sounding EQs and transformers that bring up, the fundamental harmonics.
So when we talk about
third order harmonics.
Yeah. So we talk about musical EQs where it's basically the opposite of a clean EQ. So a clean EQ
like
does
transparent.
Transparent. There you go. Musical EQ is the opposite of a transparent
tone to it. There we go. That's a good way to put it.
And maybe musical is additive in a pleasing way, whatever that's sort of subjective. When people say something is musical, presumably they mean not that music is bad, but that music is good and therefore it is adding something positive. So transparent and musical perhaps being opposite things in terms of talking about gear, talking about EQs. Okay, that's interesting. And there's a larger technical discussion we could have about what you talked about, where the more you turn it up, the cue changes, and that is something that is more pleasing in some cases. And then there's different types of EQs that relate to phase differently.
The louder you would go on a narrow frequency. Let's just take an example of a Pro Q3 because everybody knows it. It's super narrow. The more you boost, say you're in the high frequencies, the more of that particular frequency your ears are going to hear. So the chance of it hurting you and hitting that threshold of your ear hairs into putting into protection mode, right? So if you're boosting something and it's going like this and rounding out as it gets louder, the surface area of the ear is less pointy into that particular part of the ear.
So the cue widens,
more musical.
The cue widens as you go up higher in frequency. Okay.
It's on certain pieces, yes.
On this particular type of EQ we're talking about. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, like the mid cut frequency on my VT5 Fern mastering EQ, I believe gets narrower as you cut more of it. It could be the opposite of that, but I think it gets narrower as you cut more. So the first one is a broad cut at 400 is where I have it set when I do this kind of EQ move. So it's just the style of EQ that changes.
And so somebody asked in there about transparent needs a definition because people use it wrong. I just think transparent means nothing is added to it, or the limit, the smallest amount of additional information.
Yeah, transparent. You can see through it. It's like translucent. It's like a window. It's translucent, not an opaque.
Translucent different than transparent. Transparent means completely through. Translucent means almost completely through. But transparent meaning a piece of gear that adds the minimal amount of extra things, whatever it is. If you're trying to compress something, it doesn't add anything beyond compression. If you're trying to EQ, it's not adding things beyond EQ. That's the idea. Or you basically, it does the smallest, the minimum amount that it is supposed to do without adding other things.
Yeah, tubes do transparent. And thanks for Spider for that. That's why we use the Fern gear. They're really transparent. You can get heavy-handed with it for sure, but most of the time it's really transparent. And thank you, Rory. Constant EQ versus proportional Q is the idea of it changing in proportion to the, you know. So
yeah, somebody said in there transparent, no phase shift, no extra distortion or less phase shift. The minimal amount of extra stuff in there. So that's what transparent means. And transparent is a good term to use that everybody should know.
Thanks for watching. Just a reminder, all of this content is free. There's no secret knowledge here. We don't have sponsors. We don't run ads. We don't have a Patreon. All that we ask in return is that you share it with somebody. Thanks.